Hey, Becky, how are you? Can you hear me? You can hear me? I can't hear you.
How about now?
There we go.
All right.
All right, everyone. I want to welcome all of you to CVI Live. My name's Jackie Otwell, and I am in the Outreach Department at Maryland School for the Blind. I want you to thank you for joining us today. Our special guest is Dr. Becky Hommer. She is the educational specialist from the University of Maryland's Deaf Blind Project, Connections Beyond Sight and Sound. I'm going to just do a brief bio. She began her career as a teacher of students with visual impairments in 1999 after earning her Master's of Education in Vision Services from the University of Pittsburgh. She has served the birth through 21 population in both Howard and Frederick counties. She has also taught in the early learning program, instructing pre-K and kindergarten students at the Maryland School for the Blind. She has always been interested in teaching and had set her sights on becoming a special education teacher. However, her career path took a slight deviation when she met her youngest daughter, Megan. Megan was a remarkable girl who was diagnosed with cortical visual impairment. She became my first instructor in the diverse needs of children with CVI. She was the catalyst for my journey into the world of visual impairment. In 2005, I earned my O&M certification from Salus University. Prior to becoming a comms, I believed that our students with visual impairments needed efficient travel skills to be independent. As I completed my O&M certification and began working as an O&Mer, I understood the imperative significance independent travel skills have for our students. In 2018, new doors opened for her professionally. She earned her doctorate from the North Central University. Her dissertation topic was entitled "The Barriers to Academic Success for Students with Visual Impairment in Middle and High School Inclusive Classrooms." And she also had the fortunate opportunity to join the University of Maryland's Deaf Blind Project, Connections Beyond Sight and Sound. My newest role as an educational specialist is providing me with the opportunity to work with students and professionals from across the state. My years of teaching have led me to cross paths with a multitude of students, peers, and parents. Each of these people have shaped my career, uplifted me, challenged me, celebrated with me, and taught me how to be a teacher who is hands-on and all in. So we are very fortunate to have Becky here with us today. So thank you so much. One thing that I wanted to go over with everybody is at the bottom of your screen, or you can use Alt-H, the chat feature will pop up. And this is a space where you can send me a question that you might have for Becky as we go along. You can type it in there. Or if you would rather ask the question privately, my email address is in there as well. If you're up for it, you just want to send a little message. If you're comfortable saying, you know, where you're from, I'll read what your name is and where you're from, just to kind of practice with that chat feature so you're aware of how it works. So if you'd like to do that, take a minute, and then we will begin, Becky will begin her presentation for us. And everybody who's should see that she does have a PowerPoint up. All right, everybody's going to be quiet. That's fine. All right, so if you we've got Allie. She's a TVI comms from Massachusetts.
Hi, Allie.
We have Kevin. Kevin's from the Missouri Rehab Services for the Blind.
Hey, Kevin.
Chantel, parent of a son with CVI. Oh, she's turning in from South Australia. Wow, you get the prize for being the farthest away. Wow.
Hi, Chantel.
That's awesome. We have Candace from Southwest Michigan. We have Jade, O&M in New Mexico. Julie from British Columbia, Canada. Linda from Eastern Washington State. All right, well, welcome everyone. We're all so glad that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and let Becky take it over for O&M.
All right. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. I'm honored that you've devoted the next hour of your time to spend with me. So please, at any point, if you have a question or a comment or something that you want to share, please send that into Jackie and we'll address it right then and there. It's so much more fun when it's interactive as opposed to me just talking for an hour. So we did have two questions that I'm going to start out with. The first question was, how is CVI diagnosed? And so CVI is diagnosed by an ophthalmologist or neuro-ophthalmologist. As teachers, we are not qualified to diagnose. We don't have those, that's not our pay grade. So it does have to be diagnosed by an ophthalmologist or neuro-ophthalmologist. And then, but there are plenty of times that I've met with ophthalmologists who are interested in my FVA. So they want to know what my CVI assessment says, because while they can take the medical piece of CVI and look at MRIs or listen to what we have to say, really ophthalmologists often will use our assessments as the final scoring guide for the diagnosis. So don't be shy about sharing your FVAs with the neuro-opthos or the ophthalmologist, because they will absolutely hear what you have to say and it might help you get that diagnosis for your student. All right, so as a quick overview, we are going to talk about how we can justify providing O&M services to our students with CVI and how we can really advocate and make sure that they get the services that they need. We're going to talk about how to use multiple data sets when we are planning our instruction and implementing the instruction. We're going to talk about concept development and what concepts we're going to address in each phase. And we're going to talk about activities for each phase of CVI. Hopefully they'll be fun and functional. All right, so O&M is essential, right? O&M is essential for our students with CVI. Our students are entitled to receive instruction that facilitates the greatest level of independence, provides access to their environment, and helps them attain the skills required for self-determination. And so the development of a student's O&M skills is designed to provide the student with a greater understanding of their environment. When students are better equipped to understand and eventually analyze their environment, they have the capacity to decrease travel-related anxiety and increase their ability to anticipate upcoming events, activities, and challenges. And I have recently had such a high influx of phase 3 O&M students, and every single one of them has really high travel anxiety. And so the whole anticipation piece, giving those skills to our CVI students so that they can anticipate what's coming on their route or what's coming during their day or what's coming in an unexpected environment, being able to analyze that really helps them reduce that anxiety and makes them a better traveler and facilitates their ability to use their functional vision. So the multiple data sets that we want to take information from, definitely the functional vision assessment. That should be, when I'm doing an O&M assessment or I'm planning, really when I'm doing my O&M assessment, the first thing I look at is the functional vision assessment. I want to know where the student scored on the CVI range. I want to know what phase they're in, and I want to know within that range what is their greatest strength and what is their greatest need, so that I can accommodate for that when I'm completing my orientation and mobility assessment. When I'm planning interventions and instruction for my students, I want to use the complexity framework to really identify the complexity of the environment and the complexity of the task, so that when I'm instructing, I know that I have a balance between the complexities of the environment and the task, because they both cannot be high. We can't have a high complexity environment and a really frustrating task for our students. It's unfair. So when we use the complexity framework, we can find a balance for that, so that our students receive meaningful instruction. We also want to consider information from the communication matrix. We need to understand how our students use their expressive and receptive language. So all four of those assessments or frameworks or matrix, they all give us really important information when we're planning interventions and instructions for our students. I forgot to answer the second part of that question about diagnoses. So when I come to the end of this, I will answer that. So whoever asked the question, I did forget, but I'm going to come back to it. All right, so the functional vision assessment. The first thing I look at, where is the student on the CVI range? And we can see here in our example that Susie Q is a 6. She's a nice medium 6 here, and she's falling in high phase 2. And so I can make some assumptions from that. I can assume that when she's a high phase 2, that she is understanding concrete objects, and that she is getting some meaning from routine information, some routine activities throughout her day. And I'm going to use this information when I go into the orientation mobility progress chart, when I'm planning my O&M assessment and when I'm planning my interventions and instruction. So we'll remember that Susie here is a 6. And then I like to take a look at the orientation mobility progress chart. And if Susie is a true 6 and she uses her vision for traveling the same way she uses her vision to access information in her academic environment, then we're going to be able to use this progress chart to plan our interventions and our instruction. And we're going to know that she really is seeing using objects and environmental features of 2 to 3 colors, and she's really only seeing them within 4 to 6 feet. However, during O&M, she might not be able to see something within 4 to 6 feet. So these are things that we're going to use as our guideline, but we're really going to define more as we're doing our assessment or when we're working with a student every day and seeing how they're functioning on the daily activities. So what we just go through, as I'm planning or assessing, I'm going to look at each of these characteristics and apply them. Let's give you guys a second to look at that. And the O&M progress chart is in Dr. Roman's first book, the second edition, but first and second edition, but this is from the second edition of her assessment and intervention. And there's the last 2 characteristics. All right. And then we think about the orientation and mobility assessment. And here in Maryland, MSDE really kind of dictates what we are to provide in our assessments. So we have to talk about lighting conditions. We have to talk about indoor and outdoor travel environments. We have to talk about traveling in familiar and unfamiliar environments, public transportation if the student is old enough or at the right developmental level. We have to talk about travel in the home and school and the community. And not only do we have to address their current travel needs, we have to speak to their future travel needs. So these are all the things that are in our assessment. And when the assessment is complete and the report is written, I'm going to pull from that information for writing really intentional, meaningful, and well thought out instruction and strategies for my student. And hopefully, when you write your orientation mobility assessment, you're pulling that information from the O&M progress chart. All of these things just go hand in hand, and the information complements each other and really helps you get a great understanding of your student. There was something else I was going to say that will come back to me. What's the complexity framework is given in Dr. Roman's new book, Advanced Principles. And so without visual access that is modified to address our students' unresolved CVI characteristics, our students receive inconsistent, discrete, and often unverified fragments of information. But if we adapt the environment and materials to appropriately support their CVI characteristics, our students gain greater and more consistent visual access, and that in turn leads to improvement in their overall visual functioning. So when we provide the right types of accommodations and modifications for our students, they're better able to interpret the information and increase their functional vision. And that's going to help them in their orientation and mobility skills. And so Matt Tejan tells us, if service providers are to succeed in their efforts to offer students with CVI a visually accessible school day, then we must understand visual complexity. We have to understand it. We have to be able, and then we have to be able to apply those theories and strategies to accommodating for our students' vision. And then what's the complexity framework? We use this to really understand complexity, right? So the framework offers a structured, systematic approach to designing a visually accessible school day for individuals with CVI. And that came from Dr. Roman's second book. Any questions? Good. All right.
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. So here's an example. Here's what the complexity framework for the environment looks like. The complexity gets rated as extreme, high, moderate, or minimal. And I don't need to read that all to you, but I'll give you a second to look it over. The last column just kind of compares the complexity for you.
You know, I have a quick question I'm just going to ask you out loud.
Okay.
So do you do this in conjunction with your CVI assessment, or is this something maybe you just go through and do as you observe and get to know the student to get kind of so nitty-gritty, so to speak?
Right. So what's the complexity framework is relatively new, and I know that practitioners are just really starting to get to grasp it and apply it. I like to use the complexity framework for planning instruction. When I'm planning my lessons or the interventions, I really need to understand the complexity of either the environment or the task so that I can balance it so that the instruction is meaningful. I don't necessarily use the framework when I'm completing the O&M assessment. Because during the assessment, we really need to see how our students travel in extreme environments, how they travel in high and moderate and minimal. How does their behavior change in each of those settings?
Thank you.
Of course. And the second piece of what's the complexity framework is the task bank. And I just pulled out, there are multiple pages of task bank categories. I put out the distance of materials because that's really applies to our O&M. And you can see there that it incrementally gets farther. So they're going to look at a target at 12 inches. And if they can do that comfortably, if they can view that object comfortably within 12 inches, they get a C checked for comfortable. As they move through, if we see that at 2 to 3 feet, it's really challenging, they can do it, but it's really hard, it's a challenge, then they get checked at a CH. But if they cannot look beyond 3 feet, it's just so frustrating that we start to see behaviors or shutting down or off task, then we know that that's frustrational, and that gets an F check. And you go through that for each of the tasks there, and you really determine, it helps you determine when you're planning your intervention or your lesson, where in the level of complexity does this task fall. We're going to put all those together. I feel like I'm giving you guys so much information, so please stop me if you have questions. This is the second piece of that. And so after you've determined the complexity of the environment, and after you've determined, you've really filled out the task bank complexity, then you come to the complexity profile. And this is where you're going to think about your lesson. What is the skill that I'm teaching today? What is the concept? And you look back at your task bank and you determine if that task is frustrational, challenging, or comfortable. And we don't instruct our children, we don't instruct our students at frustrational levels. We can instruct our students in skills at the challenging level or at the comfortable level. But if we find that task, let's say the task is locating their locker coming in from the bus loop, if that task is really challenging, we want to control the environment to be moderate or minimal. If they can really comfortably find their locker coming in from the bus loop, then we can maybe do a high or maybe an extreme environment for them to find their locker. So this is a way for us to really task analyze the activity, determine the level of complexity, and then balance it so the task and the environment are not both challenging. One has to be, at least one has to be comfortable, or they can both be comfortable, but they both can't be challenging, and nothing should be frustrational when we're working to teach a skill. And at the bottom of the chart, you can see that it's it gives you a place to list their preferred activities, or a way for them to really reduce their visual fatigue, activities that helps them just kind of get a break. And lastly, the communication matrix. When we're working with our students, we have to understand how they communicate. What are their receptive skills? What are their expressive skills? And we do that through the communication matrix. Typically, an SLP might complete the communication matrix, but it could be the educational team. It really could be any part of the educational team that wants to know more about their communication skills. And so we're going to look at that and determine, are their communication skills pre-symbolic? Do they cry? Do they hit? What do they move their body or gesture? How are they communicating? Or do they use a concrete form of communication? Do they have 3D symbols? Is there some other concrete way that they're communicating to you? Or are they at the abstract level? Are they using spoken word? Are they using sign language? Are they using abstract pictures, or even regular pictures, which are also bordering on the abstract? So I like to determine where they are for their communication, and then go down the side and see where they are on the CVI range. Which phase are they in? We're not going to see a phase 1 student be in the abstract communication column, because students in phase 1 cannot visually identify abstract pictures. So we're going to typically see our phase 1 students be pre-symbolic. Our early phase 2 are going to be starting to kind of be on the concrete. We're going to start seeing our early phase 2 students begin to really make meaning of 3-dimensional objects and interpret that information and have it be a meaningful part of their routine. Our late phase 3 students, we're going to see them starting to border, being able to use abstract, being able to understand that a photograph represents an object, and how they can use the photograph to gain meaning, use it during instruction, and really interpret the information from a photograph, or later on a line drawing, or the board maker symbols, which are super abstract. We're going to see that in our phase 3 students. And of course, students are all unique and individual, so I'm sure there are outliers and nobody ever fits directly into one category, but typically that's the way we're going to see our students fall in relation to communication and CVI. But these are really important things to know as we're planning our lessons. All right, before I jump into concept development, I want to go back and answer the second part of the question from one of our participants. And so the first part was how are our students diagnosed with CVI? And the second part of that question was how do doctors determine if students who have global delays, if that's a cognition, if it's due to cognition, or is it due to vision? And so I really want to challenge people to think about how we learn. And if our student doesn't have access to education, can we really say that their lack of learning is due to developmental delays or cognition? Is that a fair thing to say? Once we determine where they are on the CVI range and we apply the appropriate accommodations and modifications, once we control that environment and the task so that nothing is too complex, then what can they learn, right? So we can't really say that they're not learning because of developmental delays until we determine that they're really truly having access to the instruction that they're receiving. And if that didn't answer your question, or if it didn't make sense, please let Jackie know and I will readdress for you. All right, concept development. So when we build concepts in our students with CVI in regard to O&M, our instruction has to be intentional. It has to be systematic and it has to be meaningful. Learning to navigate in one's world is a developmental process that connects new conceptual knowledge to something that's previously acquired, to previously acquired skills and experiences. And so we have to intentionally find out what they know. What are their previous experiences? What new skills can we teach them based on what they already know? We have to be really systematic in the way that we approach this. We have to make sure that the concepts that we're introducing are along the hierarchy of concepts and conceptual meanings. And we have to make sure that we're building on really good concepts. So we want to make sure that our students understand the concepts from the base of the hierarchy, so that as we begin to teach them higher level concepts, they're building on good foundational information. We have to be systematic, and it has to be meaningful. Our instruction has to be meaningful and important to them, or they're not going to buy into it. And it has to be connected to something that they know. We have to connect new concepts to previously acquired skills and experiences. So let's think about phase 1 concepts. So for our phase 1 students, instruction must be routine-based. We need to use 3-dimensional materials. The information has to be concrete. There's no abstract here yet. It has to be really concrete. It has to be based on familiar routines. And we have to be consistent in the way that we provide this instruction and the interventions. Everybody across the board needs to be consistent in the way that they're approaching instruction. The basic concepts that we're going to address in phase 1, we're going to address shapes. We're going to think about colors. We're going to address colors. and positional concepts and body awareness. This is the base of our hierarchy. So in phase one, these are the things that we really want to drive home for our students. In phase two, instruction, we have to, I know I've said this 1,000 times, I'll probably say it 1,000 more times. We have to connect new instruction to experience. So it has to be experience-based instruction, something that they know, but something that we're doing that connects to the old. So the experience, the action, the act of participating. Our instruction has to be sequential. We have to build upon the last concept. We have to be intentional. For our low phase two students, our material still needs to be three-dimensional. And for our high phase students, we're going to see them kind of teetering between the two-dimensional and the three-dimensional materials. Phase two is this really large gap of learning. It's such a wide range. Our low phase two students are going to be maybe like a 3.5. And our high phase students are going to be like a 6, like in our example with Susie. And so the space between a 3.5 and a 6 is tremendous, and the skills learned in that space is tremendous. So we have to, even though it's all phase two, we have to really understand where our students are in phase two, so that we can provide instruction appropriately. The foundational concepts that we're going to address in phase two are number concepts. We're going to talk about recognizing common objects and recognizing environmental features. And so I'm just going to take a second and talk to you about the difference between recognizing something and identifying something, because they're two separate skills. In phase two, we're thinking about recognizing, and when we recognize something, the label is already provided for you or for me. When we recognize something, that label is there. And so the label might be locker. So I would say to the student, where is your locker? I've given them the label. They have that picture now in their head, and they can go and find it. It might be, where is your cup? Or where is your backpack? Where's your book bag? And so I'm labeling what it is I want them to find. And they are either going to find it in isolation, or they're going to find it in a field of other things. But the label is already there. It's the same for objects and environmental features. So when we recognize, the name is there, the label is there, it's given to them, the image is already started to form in their head. They're being asked to recognize. For our phase three students, instruction still is going to be experience-based. It's still going to be sequential. It's still going to be intentional. And it's going to be mostly two-dimensional. We're still going to see our phase three guys sometimes want some three-dimensional materials, but mostly they're going to be able to work in the challenging and comfortable task in two-dimensional material. For the higher level concepts of phase three, we're going to think about visual interpretation of information. So we're not just asking them to look, we're asking them to look, interpret that information, make meaning of that information, and then respond. We're asking them to identify objects. So now I'm going to say to them, what is this? And I want them to give me the label. Now they're giving me the label when they're identifying it, as opposed to me giving them the label and asking them to recognize it. We are going to continue to work on describing salient features. We're going to describe salient features to them, and we're going to ask them to describe salient features to us. And we're going to continue to connect novel environments to known schemas. And so we might, if our student is familiar with the grocery store and they understand the art of finding their purchase, checking out, exchanging of the money or the credit card or however they're working it, and leaving the store, they have that mastered, and now we want them to learn how to shop at the Walmart. We're now going to take their experience of familiarity of the grocery store, and we're going to take that information and we're going to connect it to how we're going to shop at the Walmart. they're very similar, but they're also different. And so we're going to use some comparative language, and we're going to connect the two shopping experiences. We're going to talk about how they're the same, and we're going to talk about how they're different. All right, salient features. We have to talk about salient features in each phase of CVI. When we talk about salient features to our students in phase 1, we're really going to layer the way that we approach that. So we might talk about a circle. And so if we show our student a circle or a sphere and we present it on a light box for phase 1, we're going to present that object to them, and we're going to wait for them to look. And we're going to wait for them to finish looking and look away before we start to describe that salient feature to them, about how a sphere is round and it goes round and round, and it has no corners and it has no vertices, how it might roll. We're going to talk about what makes a sphere for our phase 1 students. We're going to show them. When they're finished looking, we're going to describe it to them, and then we're going to be quiet and we're going to let them look again. And then perhaps when they're finished looking, they might want to tactfully explore it. But for phase 1, we're really being very intentional about layering the way that we provide the information. For our phase 2 students, we're still going to be really intentional about how we describe the salient features, but we're going to see that students in phase 2 are able to incorporate some looking and listening. So they might still be able to look at that as you're describing the salient features. Maybe not, but maybe. So we're just going to monitor for that. If they need to look away, we're going to honor that in them. But if they're able to maintain vision while we're describing it, yay for them, because that's awesome. We're going to, again, connect familiar routines and experiences using salient features. We're going to use that comparative language about how things are the same and different. We're going to, again, use recognition and identification for our phase 2 and phase 3 students. And the thing about salient features is we learn about salient features through experience. And so if I wanted you to recognize one image from this big compilation of images that we have in front of us, I might say to you, where's the butterfly? And you can look at this big mash of images and know what a butterfly looks like. And you can find the salient features of that butterfly. So you can see the wings on the butterfly, right? We know it's the butterfly, even though it's only partially there, because even if it's a different color on other butterflies, these wings are the salient features of that. But if I were to say to you, what is this animal here? And he has this red thing on his head with the spiky things. What is that animal called? And then I would want you to go in through that encyclopedia in your head of all the things that could fit this description and come up with the best one to know that that's a rooster. And so that's the difference between recognition and identification for our salient features, and how we use that to help our students use their vision more meaningfully.
I do have a question.
Okay.
With, say, a phase 1 student, what do you do if they don't sustain their looking at an object? Do you still wait a certain period of time before describing salient features?
Great question. So you're going to go back to your functional vision assessment and see what their length is for latency, because that should be listed in the functional vision assessment, right? So when I write an FVA for my CVI students, I address each of the 10 characteristics. So if I wanted to know what their latency was for looking at this object, I would go back and check what is the typical. And I might even give them a little bit longer, because if I'm a novel person, you might need a little bit longer latency to really be able to use their vision to look at what I'm showing them. So your question is, how long should you wait? You should wait until they look. If they're not looking, if you find that it's been 45 seconds and they still haven't looked, check your level of complexity. Check your, make sure that your environmental complexity is at minimum, and make sure your task bank analysis is at comfortable. And then we're really going to be able to see the length of their latency and really wait it out. We want our students with CVI to use their vision. And so we really need to build that consistent visual, efficient visual behaviors for our students. And so I would really challenge you, if you find that it's been 45 seconds or a minute and they're still not looking, check your level of complexity on each of the environment and task, but also make sure that you've gone back to that FVA to make sure that you've accommodated appropriately for each of the 10 characteristics. And then you might find that your student is beginning to look. And don't disregard visual regard. Just because our student doesn't put their eyes on the object directly, doesn't mean that they're not visually regarding it. So they might be using that peripheral vision to begin to initiate that looking behavior. So pay attention to the peripheral look and pay attention to the eyes on the object look, because they're both meaningful and they will both tell you something. But also remembering that when our students use their peripheral vision, they're not necessarily gaining detail, they're only gaining gross information about the object. But it's still meaningful, and sometimes that's the first step. Visual regard is sometimes the first step for our students with CVI. Hope I answered that for you well.
She said thank you.
Of course. All right, so let's think about the phases of CVI. In phase 1, we're building consistent visual behaviors. We want our students in phase 1 to have consistent opportunities to use their vision to access the objects, spaces, and activities that make up their daily routines. That's our phase 1, guys. We just want them to have consistent opportunities where each of their CVI characteristics are supported. For our phase 2, our students are going to be integrating vision and function. And we want our students in phase 2 to use their vision to guide their actions. We want them to use their vision to guide their behaviors, and we want them to use their vision to guide their responses. We want their vision to be incorporated in each thing that they do. And for our phase 3 students, we want them to continue to increase their ability for visual interpretation. We want them to continue to refine their ability to use salient features to categorize and identify novel environments and objects. We want our phase 3 students, we want to teach our students in phase 3 how to analyze novel situations, apply known strategies to solve problems, and achieve their greatest level of independence. There we go. So for phase 1, let's think about activities and interventions. So for phase 1, if we think about colors and shapes, our phase 1 students are probably only going to have one color. They're going to need light, so they're going to need tons of latency. So we're going to make sure that we supply all of those, we address each of the characteristics for them. But this might be something that we do. So I have the red cube on the light box. I have I don't necessarily use a light box. I have a tracing tablet that I use. 20 bucks on Amazon. It's a little thin light box, that light tablet. So I use that, and I cut out a piece of black paper to fit the shape of my object. So you can see with the red box that came from the dollar store that it's just sitting nicely there on the light tablet, and the light is supporting, is coming up from underneath, so it supports our students' need for light. We have the ball. It's just a wiffle ball. Again, the black paper is on the light tablet, and there's a hole cut in the paper that's the same size as the ball. So all our students in phase 1 are looking at the shape, or they're looking at the color. And usually color is the first thing that we work on, because typically students in phase 1 have a favorite color. They have additional colors that they may regard, but they usually have a really favorite color. I have one of the green. The green is the cylinder shape that from APH that goes in the light box, and the blue cylinder is some slime, with little slimy things. And so we can use these to teach shapes and to teach colors. For phase one, when we're thinking about body awareness, we can do things like songs and rhymes. We can use sensory activities and functional activities. So for songs, of course, we might do head and shoulders, knees and toes, eyes and ears and mouth and nose. We might do the hokey pokey. Maybe we'll use the sensory activities for students like that. If they have a favorite vibrating toy, we could say the vibrating toy is on your hand, it's on your shoulder, it's on your leg. Really talk about their body parts using the sensory activity to alert them to that body part. And we can also reinforce the functional activities that we do every day that include our body, like brushing our teeth, combing our hair, wiping our mouth, washing our hands. All of those things are really great ways to reinforce our body parts. For positional concepts, we can play games. Things like Simon Says. Simon says, put your hand on your head. One slight segue, when we think about positional concepts, we think about teaching them in a hierarchy. So we want to start with body to body. We're going to learn positional concepts first, body to body. My hand is on my head. My foot is on my knee. My elbow is on my I don't know where does it fit, on my stomach. And then we're going to after our students have mastered that, then we're going to teach body to object. So the pencil is on my head and the book is on my foot and my arm is on the table and my foot is on the chair. So my body in relation to an object. And then the highest level of that is object to object. So I might have the cup on the shelf. I might want to put the paper under the book. So those positional concepts are taught in a hierarchy. For positional concepts, we also want to really consider the object symbol schedule. And phase one is a great time to introduce this because we're already talking about simple objects related to a really familiar routine. And so we might use the toothbrush when it's time to go brush our teeth. Put that toothbrush that matches exactly the one that they use on a piece of black paper, and now that's our object to represent when it's time to go brush our teeth. Or if they use a diaper, or if they use toilet, they use the toilet and they have toilet paper, maybe the toilet paper roll, something like that to represent their bathroom break, or lunch if they have a cup, something like that. So objects that represent an activity that also will help them know where they are in the daily schedule. And those objects are later going to be used to work on early map concepts. For our phase two students, now we're thinking about those concepts. The first concept that we talked about was number concepts. And number concepts for our phase two students might be matching a numeral to a set. And so we see that I lifted this 4 with the 4 yellow cubes right from Dr. Roman's book. It's Alicia's picture. And she has her light box with a metallic looking 4 and the 4 cubes. We might also want to work on one-to-one correspondence where we're matching this fork to the forks on the mat. For number concepts, we might want to use a sorting tray where they're rolling the die, or they're using the APH digital die where it gives you a number, and then put that many objects on the counting tray. We might want to count environmental features. So perhaps we're counting the water fountains that we pass on the way to the library. And on each of those environmental features, I might want to put a cue, an environmental cue. So on this water fountain, we have a piece of red tape. Or we might want to count the exit signs on the way to the bus loop. So this is the way that we're going to incorporate the number concept into our routines. Ooh, I'm running out of time. All right, for phase two, we can really see where our object symbols are going to come into play. So now, in addition to, we began with using these object cues to build consistent looking behaviors and to connect meaning to an object. And now we're going to use these object symbols to create routes, to say, here's my symbol for gym, let's go to the gym. And when we get to the gym, match the symbol that's in my hand to the symbol that's hanging outside the gym. So now I know that I'm in the right place, and I can use this comparative language, how they're the same. I might also say that I'm at the gym, but it's time to go home. What room am I going to pass in the middle? You know, what room am I going to pass on that route? And so we might see, the student might be able to say, I'm going to pass by the music room, so they could put that in there. Or in the beginning, you might put that in there and say, I'm at the gym and I'm going to go home, but on the way to the bus loop, I'm going to pass the music room. And so this is how we start to incorporate those symbols into higher level concepts. Down here I have Billy the Bulldog as a landmark. So Billy is the landmark at this school. And when you come in, you have Billy sitting right there and you get to see his face. He is our landmark. He is the only one in the school. It's the only place in the school where you're going to find this statue. But we need to, excuse me, consider the perspective of Billy. So when we're coming in the main hallway, when we're coming in the main doors, I see the front of Billy, I see his face, and we can talk about his salient features and his ears and his nose and all the things that make a dog a dog. But when I'm coming down the stairs from class, I'm going to see the side of Billy. And so I need to make sure that my student understands that this landmark has different perspectives. When I'm coming from the class, I might see his right side. When I'm coming from the cafeteria, I might see his back side. So we really need to help our students understand that this one landmark has many feet, has many perspectives. For the bus, sometimes I perseverate about the bus because it's such a huge challenge for our students. And so when we're asking our phase 2 student to travel to the bus, we really need to think about the complexity framework. Is the environment, where is the environment on the complexity framework? Is it high? Is it medium, moderate, or is it low? And you need to then balance the task of being independent to the bus. And so if we cannot control the environment, if the student has to leave with the rest of the students and the environment is extreme, then we want to make sure that we're balancing that with a comfortable task. And so it might be that the student goes with you sighted human guide to just outside the bus, and then you ask the student to scan for that red reflective paper that's in the bus window. So while all the buses look exactly the same, this one bus that has the red reflective paper in the window is my bus. And so to get him within 4 feet to see that, you might need to go with him human guide. Here we have a hallway, and while one might think that it is not a complex hallway, I find this hallway extremely complex. There's only 2 colors or 3 colors, but there's a huge glare, and it's just so, the pattern, excuse me, the pattern is complex. And so for my student, we can see that I put some gold reflective tape here to really offset there on the side of the locker. And the reason we put it on the side of the locker is because I want my student to be able to see that as he's traveling up the hallway. If it's on the front, he can't see it until he's next to it. But I want him to be able to see that, see his locker from 4 feet if that's where he needs to be. So putting it on the side will alert him to finding that. For the restroom symbol, I didn't mean for this page to be monochromatic either, it just happened that way. So for the restroom symbol, it's an abstract symbol, but this symbol is so well known that no matter where you go, you have a variation of this symbol. And so in this instance for our phase 2 kids, we really want to teach this abstract symbol of a restroom. But there are going to be multiple symbols of this restroom all around the school. So for this student, we just took another piece of that gold reflective tape and put it on the restroom that he uses closest to his classroom. So we're going to ask him to identify, to recognize, we're going to ask him to recognize all of the restroom symbols, but know that his is the one with the piece of gold metallic tape. For phase 3, We want our students to identify salient features. We want them to identify them. We're going to ask them to describe to us a landmark. Tell me about the landmark that's by the bus loop. Or I might describe to them a landmark within the school and ask them to travel there. So I'm not giving them the label for that. I am asking them to use the information that I've given them to identify the landmark. And the same for the location. I might say, I'm thinking about traveling to the place where we created the lovely art picture yesterday, or created the lovely abstract drawing yesterday, or something. If we did something in art, describe the activity to him and ask him to travel there. Ask him to identify that location and then travel there. I would play the game with my phase 3 students, find them all. So I have all of these staplers. We want to talk about how they're the same and how they're different. We're going to use that comparative language to understand that they're all staplers. They all do that function. They all do that one thing that staplers do, but they're different because they're different in colors, they're different in shape, they're different in size. And in the beginning, I might hide these staplers, not hide them, but place them around his room. And so they're going to be in complex spaces and they're going to be in non-complex spaces. And I want my student to scan and find all of these staplers. And then I'm going to take them, after he's mastered that, I'm going to take them and hide them along a route. Place them along a route. I'm not going to hide them. I'm going to place them along the route and ask him to find them. So if we're traveling from his classroom to the cafeteria, and I know he knows we have 4 staplers, if he gets to the cafeteria and only has 2, he needs to turn around and retrace his steps to find those 2 extra staplers. So what we're asking him to do is put in his head the salient features of a stapler, to remember the image that's in his head that we've already reviewed, and then find that in a place where he wouldn't really expect it. And it could be any object that's his. And sometimes I play a game with one of my students. He loves this game, where we have a bag. We put stuff in a bag, and then we review the objects in the bag. And then I'll take the objects and I'll place them in this hallway, and I'll take a picture of where I put it. And then I'll show him the picture, and he has to identify the place, and then he has to go and find the object. He loves that game. And then the last thing that you might play is what doesn't belong. So you can see we have a lunch tray and a fork and a spoon and a tennis racket and a dispensary of napkins, napkin dispensary. And so we would ask our student which one of these things doesn't belong. And to do that, our student has to understand that a tray, a fork, and a spoon go together. And I might find them in the lunchroom. And this thing that holds the napkins, if somebody has always given him a napkin and he's never had to take a napkin out, he might not know what that is. And so if he doesn't know what that is, that's a really great time to go back and talk about the salient features of this napkin dispenser. And so what we really want our student to do is understand that this tennis racket doesn't belong in the category of things that go in the cafeteria. And it really is quite a tricky one because, of course, the tennis racket is the same color and shape as our spoon. And so our student in phase 3 really has to sort through the things that make a spoon, and the things that make a tennis racket, and how are they the same and how are they different, and how do I determine that it doesn't belong in this category. And I'm at 4. Do I have a few more minutes, or do I need to stop? Oh, I can't hear you.
It's 4 o'clock now, so I don't know if you kind of want to just go a little faster.
I'll go faster. So, photographs for our phase 3 student. My student and I took these pictures together. So this is her gymnasium. We talk about her gymnasium. We explore the gymnasium. We took the pictures of the doors and of the scoreboard and the basketball hoop and the soccer net. And I wasn't crazy about taking a picture of this basket, but she decided that she needed this basket because every time she comes into the gym, whatever they're doing is in the basket, their jerseys or their balls or something. So this basket was important to her, so I included it. We do that for each part of for each location in her school. take these pictures. In the beginning, we're going to go to the gymnasium, and we're going to take the picture and we're going to match it to the place in the gym where it belongs. We're going to do that in the cafeteria. We're going to do that in the library. And then we're going to start taking two groups of pictures, the groups from the gym and the groups from the cafeteria, mixing it all up and asking her to sort the pictures either into the gym or into the cafeteria. And then you're going to do that with 3 locations. Then you're going to do that with 4 locations. So the student has to be really systematic in understanding that this scoreboard goes to the gym, but the lunch tray goes to the cafeteria. You can use that to plan routes. So if I'm at the gym, but I want to go to the bus loop, I'm gonna, what is the route to get there and what do I need to pass on the way? What comes before this landmark and what comes after this landmark? We want to work on time distance concepts. If I'm at the front door of my school and I want to travel to my classroom, if I'm at the front door, am I going to get to my classroom first, or am I going to get to the art room first? Which is going to be the quickest for me to get to? Time distance. An abstract representation of the bus loop. If I'm the first bus, I'm going to get there quickly. But if I'm the last bus, it's going to take me much longer to do that. That's it. In the end.
Well, I want to thank everyone for participating today. I don't have a survey. Usually I do, and I do not have it this time. But I wanted to let you know that our next 2 will be March 23rd with Amanda Lewick. She's going to be talking about the program components for a student with CVI, and Jen Willis is going to be doing the communication matrix in CVI on April 27th. Oh, I have a question. Oh, no, I don't. I'm sorry. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Becky, for participating us. Oh, I got to see, can you email out this PowerPoint? I'm going to see, we will post this on YouTube through the Maryland School for the Blind's YouTube channel, and I'll see if I can attach it there, because I don't know a good way to do like a group participant email through Zoom.
And so my email is up there. So if you want a copy, email me directly and I will send it to you.
That's perfect. That's even easier. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, Jackie.
Oh, thanks
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.